In 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. And welcome everyone to this episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. Welcome everyone to this special episode of the Real Leaders Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Edwards. Joining us today is KoAnn Vikoren Skrzyniarz, the founder and CEO of Sustainable Brands here in Sustainable Brands 21 in San Diego. KoAnn, thanks for being with us today.
It's a pleasure to be here.
So KoAnn, Sustainable Brands, where did the concept come from? We're here, we get to be in this wonderful venue here in San Diego with amazing speakers, passionate about their view on how business can be used in the world. But where did this idea come from?
It came from a love of the potential for business. I believe in the power of business innovation. When I got started, the narrative of the day was that government and NGOs were going to save the world, and that business was the enemy of our future. And I really believe, as I say, that business has the capacity and the skill sets for driving the pace of change that's necessary. Specifically, really conscious that brands sit at the center of the economic ecosystem, and as such, they have the opportunity to influence both business models, materials, supply chain norms and behaviors, and even more importantly, set consumer aspirations and demand. So I really felt confident that the market drivers, when we started, though they weren't seen at the time, were going to be such that brands were going to have to grapple with the environmental and social impacts that we are currently seeing unfolding in the world, and that those that really excelled at innovating to provide solutions to those environmental and social challenges were going to be the ones that would ultimately win in the market.
And what have you found over your time here at Sustainable Brands that have been kind of the key similarities of the companies that are really taking on these problems?
Oh, that's really a good question. I would say the similarities have more to do with the leaders that have come to the table first. I think we have businesses that span all kinds of different industry sectors and sizes. We certainly zeroed in on a focus on global multinationals, mostly because of the consciousness of the necessary scale that we need to operate on, and the power that those companies have to create this change at the scale that we need. But I can't say that there's anything specific about the shape of a company particularly. Obviously, we draw a lot on consumer brands because we believed at the time that consumers would ultimately start asking more of the companies that they do business with, and that has been the case. So that has been a through line for us since the beginning. But more, I think, about just the individual leaders. We came to market when there was no recognition of the state of things as it exists today, except by some more forward-looking systems thinkers, I guess, who kind of recognized and resonated with the thesis. Either they believed it or they wanted to believe it, and so we more attracted to a demographic at the beginning, and I think that's over time that has changed because the market conditions have been such that more and more people are starting to recognize the necessity of stepping into this work.
Absolutely. And one of the things that is frustrating but also inspiring is all of these different names for impact, sustainability, and to today's theme, regeneration. Mm-hmm. Why is regeneration the theme? What was the conversations going on behind the scenes to choose that word?
Interesting question. We, from the beginning of the company, believed that sustainability in and of itself was not going to be enough to get us to the goal. But we realized that at the time, people didn't realize that our business as usual was unsustainable. So we had to somehow or another differentiate between business as usual and the next step. We are at a place, we believe, where increasingly people understand that we're not operating in a sustainable way, not living in sustainable ways, or operating businesses in sustainable ways. And so we feel, as the vanguard of this discussion around the world, that it's time to move on and really help call out the fact that, in fact, as I was saying opening night, net zero or focusing on reducing harm, or even net positive, is ultimately not going to be enough. We need to retool the way that we think about the role that we have to play in the world, such that we start to look at how we can enable environmental and social systems that are self-healing and self-perpetuating. This is it's a paradigm shift and a pretty substantial mental model adjustment from the way that we've traditionally thought about the world. And I would say that we're trying to introduce a topic today that we believe is going to be something that we will all be working to get our head around for the coming 5-10 years, certainly this decade.
Interesting. What are some of the mega trends that you're seeing that are accommodating this movement, I guess, if you will? Like today, carbon credits, offsets was something that was very interesting. There's a whole market out there I had no idea about, obviously, and I should be paying attention to. What are some of the mega trends that you're paying attention to?
Well, I think in general that just stakeholders across the board are becoming more savvy and more expectant of businesses. So I mean, the statistics are such that awareness and interest in sustainable lifestyles in the consumer base is moving mainstream. It crosses all demographics, conservative, progressive, age groups, and regionality, and that's just because of the challenges of climate change and social unrest and political discord are in everyone's face right now. So that plus the investor community starting to recognize risks and starting to really put their money in places that we want the money to go, if you will say.
Definitely.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing the marketing leadership community, which is the core stakeholder that we've been trying to engage for a long time, finally starting to recognize that that they're wrestling to maintain their credibility, their growth in general, and they're having a harder time attracting talent. They're being disintermediated in some ways by direct-to-consumer brands who are inherently purpose-driven, and that's impacting growth. And so when your pocketbook starts to feel it, there's an obligation, I guess, in the role to try to start figuring out what that is. And there are now enough proof points out there that brands that are authentically working from a place of purpose are more resilient and actually driving growth relative to those that aren't. So
it's clearly been manifesting in so many large organizations. I mean, a lot of the workshops we're working with, I know Dove had an example, and I think what you all have done a great job of is really meeting people where they are, organizations. I mean, Shell is here, and a lot of people I would have thought may have had a gripe with that.
For sure.
I think that's the most beautiful thing about this conference. When it comes to approaching people who may call this woke capitalism or may call this socialism, or what Milton Friedman said, hints of socialism, things like that. How do you approach people?
With an open invitation, is what I would say. We very much believe that that getting to the future that we want has to come through disruptive innovation at the grassroots level, but it also needs to come from creative self-destruction from large-scale industries that are not sustainable and that are creating the roots of our problem. And so it's for us, it's I want to choose my word wisely. I would say ignorant. That may be a harsher, more emotive term than I mean to use, but it's short-sighted is maybe a better word to say, that to expect that we should wall out those industries that are the biggest part of the problem. And have been in the media industry, for example, for a very long time, and I watched the media industry and managed the media, managed media businesses through the transition to digital. A lot of people have managed businesses through the transition to digital, not just in the media industry. And there are lots of examples of evolution, creative self-destruction, where companies have been able to retool themselves for a current reality. And I think we're really interested in trying to enable that and accelerate that as much as we can. So,
KoAnn, it seems like just through this conversation, you may or may not have a clear vision of the world. It seems like you have a clear vision of what you like the world to look like one day when it comes to capitalism and stakeholders and regeneration, how everyone is able to work together. Tell us about it.
Well, I would say that our new hero statement, if you will, or it's not really a tagline, but our hero statement is that sustainable brands is the vanguard of business brands enabling business and society to thrive in harmony with nature. And that is really the descriptor of the future that we want. We believe that business is necessary and amoral in a sense. I mean, we are going to continue to trade with each other, and that is a reality. We just want to see business and society thriving in harmony with a thriving nature, and we believe it's possible.
KoAnn, I think a visionary leader is a great trait and a mark of a real leader. What is your definition of a real leader?
That's such an interesting question, because I don't think about that a lot. I will tell you what I think seems to have what people have appreciated about me, I guess, which is just that I'm willing to be authentic and willing to be vulnerable and willing to acknowledge, willing to say my truth and to acknowledge that my truth is only the truth as I see it. I don't have a claim to omniscience, right? And I think that I've really appreciated leaders who are humble enough to recognize that they may have an expertise in one area, but that they don't hold a corner on full truth, right?
Definitely.
So, willingness to learn and listen.
Beautiful. For KoAnn Vikoren Skrzyniarz, I'm Kevin Edwards, asking you to go out there, be authentic, be humble, and always, folks, keep it real. Nice.
Awesome. Nice to meet you. Yeah.
Nice to meet you too.